Oliver Marcus Malloy, I don't know if I'm saying that right, said once, being self-employed means working 12 hours a day for yourself so that you don't have to work 8 hours a day for someone else. So today we're going to talk about somebody, we're going to talk with someone who works for himself and does art. So today, in the studio, I have Mr. Mark Gonyea.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
I'm good.
I think the listeners are probably good. So one thing that we should just chat about real quick is, Mark, who are you and what do you do?
Well, first, I had never heard that quote, but I completely agree with it.
Okay.
I think
All right.
that is perfect. I'm a Mark Gonyea. I'm a graphic artist. I'm a children's book author. I'm a illustrator. That is both what I do and who I am.
Okay. Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Yeah, that is almost everything.
Okay. So I had actually we'd met in passing a lot.
Yeah.
We both happen to love our local comic book shop, Fantastic Planet here in Plattsburgh, and we've met there a couple times probably. But when I was doing work with an art studio, I was like, hey, I know a guy, he does art. Let's get him to do his stuff for display, and maybe we actually had a like a Comic-Con thing and got you a table. And I'm gonna say this, I fell in love with your art style, the simplistic. How would you describe your art style?
I would describe it mostly as minimalist, but minimalist narrative, meaning my first graphic design book was called Complicated Doesn't Make It Good. It was called a book about design, Complicated Doesn't Make It Good, but I call it Complicated Doesn't Make It Good.
It's so true, though.
Yeah. So what I do is I break everything down into its least parts.
Right.
So that even if it looks complicated when you pull back, if you pull in close up, it's all very simple shapes and
and they usually conjure some sort of feeling. So in my house, actually, I have your artwork all over the place. But in my house, one of the most talked about pieces that I have up in my house is Frankie and the Mermaid.
Yeah,
which is I think still one of my favorite ones. It's Frankenstein meets a mermaid, and each panel is a bit of the story, and you can't help yourself but work yourself into some sort of narrative pacing. You can't run through it. It's all the little details are, you can't miss them, but it's perfect.
So, it's so interesting how that narrative poster works. It's different than a comic. It's different than a book. It's different than a straight illustrated poster. It's really its own thing. And it really paces itself in its own unique way.
Yep. So I'll have people over who have never seen it, and you can tell that they'll start at cube number 1, and they'll work their way all the way to the end, and you can tell when they get to the end because they either go, "Aw," or they go, "Oh," because it's kind of funny and also disturbing in another way, which is totally my humor.
Those are my favorite kind of jokes.
Totally awesome. So I'm just gonna say we'll put a link to your information up on the Facebook, but also in the details for this podcast. But what inspired you to do this work for your career?
I'm one of those I feel like a very rare person that I've always known what I wanted to do. Like when I was a kid.
Weird.
Yes, right?
Okay.
Freak. When I was a kid, I copied Peanuts cartoons out of the Sunday paper. And in first grade, I would copy the cartoons out of the paper, bring them into school, just up a couple doors down, Broad Street Elementary.
Okay, wow. Local man,
and sell them to my other classmates.
Oh, and a hustler.
To the point that the teacher had to call my parents and say, please don't let Mark do this anymore because all the other kids are spending their milk money.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
That's really
And that was my first exposure to, I think I can do this.
Yeah. So that's artwork and such, and I know that you have worked with different comic book artists and such in the past. But your career, and if you follow you on Facebook like I do, and you can actually tell that you have a very set design concept, or you're actually, I would almost say you're almost hyper-focused on the concept of design.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, very much so. I am a big believer in not that you don't try new things, but that you play to your strengths.
Okay.
And my strength is not illustration, is not traditional comic book cartoon work, like
Okay.
Adam Kubert or, Matt Wagner or somebody like that.
No, but you could do that.
I could. It takes me forever.
Right,
Like
okay.
it would take me a week to do a page because that I'm that much of a perfectionist when it comes to illustration.
Sure.
For some reason, when I do design, because it's something ingrained in my psyche, it doesn't seem as difficult to
Well,
me.
I've seen you send me designs for something, and then I'd just be like, "No, I like this," and then like 5 seconds later, you've completely changed it because you've moved all the pieces around.
Right.
So that comes naturally to you. But you
I
went
think
to
so.
school for this.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I went to the Joe Kubert School of Cartooning and Graphic Design, which
Wow.
actually had a more emphasis on cartooning than graphic design. But my baptism of fire was the first professional position I had after graduation was actually as graphic artist for Heavy Metal magazine.
So awesome.
Awesome.
Super awesome.
Amazing.
That's really cool.
Totally in over my head.
Yeah, I
So,
bet. I bet.
I get there and they're like, okay, so this is what you're going to be doing and things like that. And I'm like, wow, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Because that's not just like an American publication. That's an international
It's
publication.
an icon. It's an iconic magazine. Yeah.
that's
And I was there
amazing.
for 6-7 months maybe. And then they moved offices. And it was really funny because my immediate supervisor comes into my little office and she goes, so I don't know if you've heard, but we're moving offices. I'm like, yeah, okay. You don't have to come with us if you don't want to.
Okay.
So, and that's basically how they told me, like, it's not working out.
Yeah, it's not you, it's us.
Right. And then after that, I came back to the Northeast, got a job as a graphic artist for Vermont Teddy Bear.
Very cool.
And that was really where I honed my graphic sensibilities, my graphic principles, and really dialed in what I believe about graphic design.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So you went to school.
Yes.
You did get the trial by fire.
Yes.
So you got a job pretty much right out of school.
Yeah, that was a friend of mine had gotten that position, but he was from California.
Okay.
So and again, I just kind of luck into things sometimes. And he came to me, and we were good friends in school. So he came up to me and he was like, "Hey, you want to work for Heavy Metal?" I'm like, "Yeah,
Absolutely.
So he brought me in, and they looked at my portfolio. I mean, I had a portfolio, and I had a
Sure.
graphic
like
chops
every
at
good
the time. Yeah,
student would.
right.
Right.
And they were like, "Sure, come in on Monday." I'm like, "Great."
Okay. Well, okay, so I guess we can't go through your whole history here, but at some point, so you started working at Vermont Teddy Bear,
Yeah.
and at some point it clicked to you what you were going to do in artwork.
Yes.
Okay.
That mostly came from people asking me questions, because working in the design department, I was initially one of 3 people, eventually one of 1 person.
Okay.
So I
So-
didn't
so
force
efficient,
anybody
they
else out. They just
okay.
left.
All right. Sure. Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what happens in that situation is people ask you things like, "Why is that blue?" And you go, wait, okay, I know
you can't say I don't know.
Right,
You have to
right.
have an answer.
You're like, okay, I know I had a reason
Okay.
and that got me thinking about, why is that blue? Like, why do you make those decisions as a designer that happen unconsciously, that happen 20 times in a second,
Right.
while you're designing? You're like, okay, I'm gonna click that 1 step up or 2 steps
Sure.
up. I'm gonna move that to the left one point. Why? Why is it better that direction? Why is it better more on the left than on
Sure,
the right?
yeah.
Why is it better 20% larger than 20% smaller? And that really, really laser focused my mind
Right.
on.
Well, somebody's got to think of that.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to have an answer.
Right.
You have to be able to say, well, that's bigger than everything else because you want that to be more important, or that's white space. Companies hate white space.
Sure. Yeah.
They,
absolutely.
they want to fill every
Yeah.
possible space. You can go, no, you want actually not filling that makes this other thing more
That's
important.
Not a good enough answer, though.
Right.
You have to probably sparkle it up a little bit. Okay, so this is what you're doing.
Yes.
Right now. So
I do it
you're-
every day.
You're out there, but you're not working for Vermont Teddy Bear Company anymore.
Every once in a while, they'll ask me for a graphic pattern or mostly patterns at this point. But yeah, very rarely. Yeah.
Okay, but you work for yourself.
Yes.
And that's where we're at.
Yes.
So doing this design and basically I can't find a better word for it except for hustling.
Yeah.
Hustling every day.
Yeah.
Where are the difficulties that you face in your professional life?
Right. And it is. I'm not a big fan of the term side hustle.
Okay.
But the hustling as a profession, yeah. My mostly difficult aspect of freelancing is finding new work, and I tend to find people I enjoy working with. And that's one of the benefits of working for yourself. If you work for a client and they're like a nightmare,
Sure.
you can be like, when they come back to you, you can be like, you know what?
We're done.
We're done.
Right.
This isn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So it's that, and I'm fortunate enough that I have a few clients that do come back to me because I think I'm reasonable in I'm not a dictator when it comes to design. I have my own opinion,
Right.
and I will tell you that opinion freely. But as a freelancer, if I'm working for you, that's not my position to tell you what you want.
And you give them a product that they're
Yeah.
happy with.
Yeah.
And
So
then you move forward.
There's actually a couple. There's a magician in Australia that comes back to me for design, and he found me.
How exotic.
Yeah,
Wow.
and he comes back to me for different things every once in a while. And I was saying earlier that I have a board game in the works right now from someone, and he found me off of. I do a lot of Kickstarters too, so
Yes.
he found me off of one of those.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I mean, like other side of the world.
Yeah.
Basically. Wow.
So that's the web. It's everywhere. And that's the really 10 years ago, I never would have thought I would be competing worldwide for things.
Right.
And it's good and bad because
Right.
you're open to tons of more work, but you're also competing with a million
world of
more.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's probably the most stressful part is that downward pressure on value and trying to fight back against that somewhat.
Okay.
As much as you can.
So you have these clients that they reach out to you.
Yep.
What does a work day for you look like?
I get up. I'm a night owl, so I don't go to bed till 2 or 3.
Okay.
And so I'll get up about 10, 11.
Wow. Okay.
sometime. So
It's like halfway through my day.
Yeah. And I try to get up early sometimes, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Well,
it depends.
if you don't need to, don't.
Right, yeah. It depends. One of the things I love about graphic design is it shuts your brain off. So I can sometimes I start a project at midnight, and then all of a sudden it's 4 a.m.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, right.
Yeah,
sleep.
it's like a Zen activity.
Yeah, you just turn everything else off.
Okay.
And so whenever I get up, I watch a little bit of news, return some emails, grab some lunch or breakfast, and then mostly it's afternoon is work time. So it's like noon to 4, noon to 5. That's when I'm focusing on graphic design. That's when I'm focusing on making phone calls and
Right.
finding work and touching base with other clients and things
Yeah.
like that. And then I probably don't go back to design till 8 or 9.
Okay.
And then while I'm sitting there watching TV or watching Netflix, I'll flip something on, and then the laptop's always open. So,
Sure.
And that's
For inspiration
Yeah,
to,
for
to
sure.
kick in.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how does that weigh? That's got to be stressful.
Yes.
In a sense, because you're almost depending on other people needing you.
yes, very
rather
much
than-
so. Every month is starting from scratch.
Okay.
And that's my blood pressure is actually super high.
Right. Right.
Because every month is, okay, I need to make
X amount
$1,200 this month.
Yeah.
And I don't know how yet.
Right.
So where am I going to find that?
So at what point do you just go, you know what, I'm done with art. I'm going to start working at Dunkin' Donuts.
My parents would love that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure. I'm sure they
would be great.
Yeah.
I can never do that. I just can't. I don't know why it would be to my advantage to do something else.
Right.
But I can't because
This is your passion.
even if I did that, I would still be doing what I'm doing.
Right.
So I might as well do what I'm doing.
That's awesome. So then let me ask you then. So you've got this kind of gun for hire situation going on.
I like that. That's a good way to put it.
Aside from, the inaccessible, or I'm sorry, not necessarily dependable work,
Right.
what would be another big stress in your life?
That is an interesting question. I would say, so we're not saying financial, something other than financial?
It could be financial, but like...
Well,
See,
okay.
I would struggle for inspiration. That's where I would struggle.
That I actually don't have a problem with.
Okay.
And the reason for that, and I have thought of this in preparation for being here today. In the past 4 or 5 years, I've been freelancing for about 12. And for the past 4 or 5 years, I've gotten really good at seeing the creative crest and meaning, okay, I've been really creative and really cranking out work for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Today, it's not happening. Today, and I can see that, and I can tell myself, okay, I am going to binge season 3 of Daredevil today.
Good job.
Yeah. So I know I can't force it, and I know that's not going to help.
But that's great because you're self-aware.
Yeah.
And you are allowing your mind, your body, and possibly the universe to tell you, hey, you might need to take a break today.
You got to recharge.
That's
can't.
great.
Yeah. And that's really been an epiphany in the last few years, where
Right.
I can say I can allow myself to
take a day off.
Yeah, take a day off.
Yeah.
Right. To not always be trying to crank things out, because you're not going to get your best work that way either if you're forcing it. And sometimes you can do that by working on something else, and I do that a lot too. Like, oh, I'm working on this book that's not really paying off this week. Let me work on a poster.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That
seems
to be going
when
better.
you say book, someone has commissioned you to work on a book?
Well,
or?
no, I still do kids' books. So
Right.
I'll work on, I always have 4 or 5 different concepts going on at one time, where it's
Irons in the fire.
Right. And I'll say, oh, well, this idea I haven't touched for a little while. Let me go back and see if my subconscious has solved any of those issues.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more often than not, it has.
That sounds like a very lonely existence, though.
I have forced myself. I'm not a social person.
Oh, you could have fooled me.
Yeah. Well, thanks. I have come to, especially after for the first 4 or 5 years after I left Teddy Bear and I was living by myself and on my own. I'm like, this is great. Now I'm like, now I'm the one that'll make the phone call or the text. I'll be like, hey, so what's everybody doing tonight?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do try to get out as much as I am capable of.
Right.
Which is,
we are social creatures.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean we have to be social all the time, but you do need contact with other people.
Yeah. I do game nights as well over in Vermont.
That's great.
So we'll do that once every couple weeks.
And this is just a couple of friends.
Friends. Yeah.
That's awesome.
At most, maybe 4 or 5.
Yeah, I have 2 types of game nights in my life where one is a game night that I have every single week and that's open to the public, and the other will be like a dedicated game that's usually too complicated for noobs to come into, like Gloomhaven or Zombicide, and but that's usually with a dedicated crew, and we probably do that once every quarter.
Right. I suggest Lords of Waterdeep.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah,
it's absolutely great.
It's one of my favorites.
And you can. It tickles the D&D bone.
Yeah, right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
Which is great. So how else do you make a living?
I have about there's tendrils all over. So, I have artwork on 10 different sites online. And even though if those don't bring in. I try to. It's like a living with 1,000.
Like artwork, as in like for sale.
Like
artwork.
print on demand,
Okay,
or
cool.
you know,
All right.
Etsy. You know,
Oh, okay.
And it's all these different things. Like Etsy. Okay, Etsy brings in a couple $100 a month.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Every 4 or 5 months, I do a Kickstarter that brings in a couple $1,000. I'm on Society 6 that brings in $50 a month.
Right.
I'm on.
So at some point,
My
you had
taxes are a nightmare.
right. But you had to teach yourself, be like, oh, I just came into like $4,000.
Right.
That has to last me for the rest of the year.
I really wish I had known that before I left Teddy Bear because I
Sure.
left Teddy Bear about a year after I got my first book deal, and I had a lot of money in the bank.
Okay.
And that's all gone now.
Right.
But I wish at that moment I had known somebody in that industry that could have pulled me aside and said, "This is not normal.
No. Yeah.
This is not an
absolutely.
ongoing situation."
Yeah. That's
So that would be my advice to anyone starting
this kind
starting freelancing right now. It's like,
right. Because
save for a rainy day.
there is that concept that is very real to some people of the starving artist.
Yes.
And that's with this idea that you never know when money is going to necessarily come in. But the other part of that is having to actually get up in the morning or in the early afternoon and get out there and
Yeah.
act and do some stuff.
Right.
So
Luckily, I'm never at a loss for motivation to work.
that's great.
Yeah, and I don't know. I guess that's something from my parents. Like
You're never at a loss for motivation to work for yourself.
yes,
Okay.
very very true.
So let me ask you then. You said every once in a while you allow a day
Yeah.
to just kind of you veg, you binge watch, or you do something else. Is there anything else that you would say you do to take care of yourself?
I go to a lot of movies.
Okay.
I enjoy
In the theater.
Okay.
Okay. Now-
With friends or by myself.
So you're in Vermont.
Yep.
Most of the time.
Yep.
And so what theater do you visit?
I will do the Majestic.
Okay.
In Williston is nice. My favorite theater actually is probably the Palace,
Okay.
right
All
off of Shelburne Road. It's not a great theater,
No.
but for whatever reason, it speaks to me. Like it reminds me a little bit of the Strand.
Yeah. Okay.
You
All
know,
right.
and that was the theater.
It's kind of old school.
Right.
All right.
It's only got a few theaters, and it's got good popcorn.
That's very important.
So I enjoy that. I don't get into the Roxy in downtown Burlington too much because
It's in downtown Burlington.
It's in downtown Burlington. Right.
Right. So you go see a lot of movies.
I'll go. I enjoy seeing other people's creative efforts.
Okay. So does that mean art galleries too, or?
I don't get to art galleries as much as I would like, for
Okay.
sure. Usually they're only shows that I'm a part of.
Right. Absolutely. like that I might invite you to, or something. Okay.
Right. And so that I would like to see more, and I would like to see more classic art and things like that.
Okay.
I do a lot of driving. That's how I de-stress for the most part. Actually,
Wow. So you enjoy driving?
I enjoy driving.
Okay.
And
So-
that's actually something I'm looking into as a side gig.
Okay.
Like if I can do delivery for 10 hours a week just to get out of the house.
Yeah. That's cool.
I would enjoy that.
Yeah, as long as you enjoy it. Speaking about traveling,
Yes.
a little bit. Something else that I know that you do or you have done often in the past are trade shows.
Yes.
So what is that like?
Those are great. Like I did the San Diego Comic-Con for 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And I drove to San Diego for the last 3 years of that.
From the North Country.
From the North Country, from
Wow.
Vermont.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how much I like driving.
Wow.
Yeah. And I have friends all across the country. So like I can stay with my brother in Georgia, in the state of Georgia. I have friends in Austin. I have friends in Vegas.
I'm glad you like traveling because that sounds terrible to me. I'm not a fan.
I enjoy the movie of motion.
Okay.
Like I'm looking at the window of the car and I'm just
Inspired.
taking it in. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so but when you're doing a trade show,
Yeah.
what if you were So I've been a part of trade shows, just help organizing and stuff. I did not realize before I had done a trade show how much of a world of its own a trade show is.
Yeah, very much.
And that a lot of times there are people who only do trade shows, and that's where they make their bread and butter.
Yep.
Of course, on selling stuff online, but they're really making their money for the year in a trade show that's probably 6 to 8 hours long.
Right.
So that's...
I am not one of those people.
No, you are not. You are not. But
Right.
you do have by far one of the most ingenious setups for tables that I've
I get
ever
more
seen.
comments on my poster display than.
Yeah. Do you want? You don't want to give it away?
No,
or-
I'd have to.
Okay.
Because people walk by, and I make my poster displays out of Tinker Toys because they're purposely made to make other things out of.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and they're perfect.
It fits in line with your artwork
Yes.
style too,
Yeah.
and the color.
Yes,
the
very
massive
much.
amount of color.
And it's perfect for, I want to display as many posters as possible. So I can create these racks where I can put 6 or 7 posters in one line. And then in an 8-foot table, I can get 6 of those across. I'm showing 40 or 50 posters.
Right.
You know, I'm showing twice as much material as everybody else at the show.
Right. And each poster you've got to sell for a certain amount of money because you had to spend a certain amount of money on each poster.
That's actually one of the things I probably got the most out of from working at Vermont Teddy Bear, because eventually as art director there, I was included in a lot of their budgetary meetings.
Great. Oh, cool.
Which are not terribly interesting, but it really got me to think about supply and demand and cost and retail cost versus wholesale cost and all of these business things that I had never really considered until that experience.
Right.
So I know a lot about my numbers.
Okay.
Like I can look at, okay, that poster cost me $3 to make. I have to sell it for 10. I can discount it to 8 if I need to, 7 or 8.
Sure.
You know, and oh, I'm going to do it for 5 because it's a clearance. You know, I know it costs $200 to be at the show. It's $50 in gas to get to New Hampshire. You know,
So you learned this a little bit from working for Vermont Teddy Bear, but probably mostly through experience. Like trial and error, maybe a little bit?
For the shows, definitely.
Okay.
And that was, I'm trying to think, the first shows I did it took me 3 years to really dial in my display and the product that I was showing. My first set of posters was 10 by 15 because in my head, that's the size of a comic book page. And that's what I was.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
That's what I was trying to emulate.
That makes sense to me.
There are no 10 by 15 frames.
No.
So
It's more like 11 by 17
or 11 by 17 was probably the closest. So the feedback I got after the first year of shows was like, dude, you're killing us. You're killing it. Like, I have to custom frame everything I buy from you.
Oh, that's right.
So then I went to 16 by 20 posters, which ended up being far too expensive to produce because this was before digital printing.
Sure.
So I had to print 500 of.
Still, with digital printing, it's still expensive.
It's not terrible.
Okay.
Like well, after the 16 by 20, that just wasn't profitable because that cost $10 a poster to get.
Sure.
So, and I was only selling them for 20, and nobody wanted to pay $20 for a poster.
Right. So that's a huge loss for the posters you don't sell.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So then I ended up at 12 by 16 size, which is not a custom frame size, is less than 13 by 19, which means it's cheap to print.
Oh.
And you can do them in color, and so
There you go.
Yeah, it took forever to get to there.
Right.
But I've been running those posters for 10 years.
Because there's not really a support group out there that's saying, "Oh, right, you guys, you need to do it this way because it'll save you money."
Well, there is, at least in Vermont now, there is a Facebook group called the Vermont Comic Creators Group, I think.
That's great.
Yeah, and it is a great little. We have meetings once a month, and it is a great little group of. So, where do you get your stuff printed? Like,
That's awesome.
Are you doing this show?
It's kind of like an unofficial union.
Yes.
Of some sorts. That's great. Okay, so this podcast is about mental health.
Yep.
And we've already talked a little bit about how your process and maybe what is a little stressful for you. But what could you say are benefits to your mental health by choosing this line of work?
Very much being able to choose who I work with, what I work on, and if I'm working at all.
Okay.
I am master of my own domain,
Which is not something a lot of people can say.
Not a lot of people can say that, and it's the best and worst aspects of it.
Okay.
It's great because I set my own tone, I set my own schedule, but I also am responsible for everything.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
all on me.
You have no one else to blame.
Right. There's no one else to be like, yeah, but he was supposed to do that.
Right.
Like no, that was
Though I have seen a couple times where on your Facebook you would order posters,
Yes.
and they would come in misprinted or
yes,
something.
that's
and-
very common. That's yeah.
Oh, that's got to be a pain in the butt though.
That's stressful a little bit, but I've experienced enough in the industry that I know that's not a deal breaker. Most publishers or
Will take
most
care of you.
printers, yeah, and if they don't, you don't go back to that printer.
Okay.
You know,
That's absolutely.
And there was one time, and this was probably the most stressful printing. Was I was doing a Kickstarter. It was 8 different 18 by 24 posters.
I think I know what you're talking about.
This is the 1 to 100
Yep.
series.
I remember that one.
So and for that size, I order from a specific printer online, which does prints overseas and ships to
Right.
the U.S. It showed up via UPS, wrapped in cellophane, soaked in red ink. It was a horror show.
Oh no.
So, and the guy, it was so funny because the UPS guy was just giving, like, I'm like, what is going
He's
on?
like, it's not me, but
Right.
I didn't do this,
Like,
dude.
I just drop above, buddy. And they reprinted them, which was fine. But that added, another
Sure.
3 weeks to
Time
the
and,
process.
and you always have that idea that you might lose a sale in
Yes.
that time and,
Yep.
and such. And so that is pretty stressful, I would think.
Yeah.
So if there was something about your career, about your work life that you would change, if you had I'm giving you the magic ability to change one aspect
Right.
of your work life, what would it be?
That's a good question. I would like a more dedicated space to work.
Okay.
When I started, because I work at home and I do have a dedicated space at home.
Sure.
Which is fine, and it works for my needs right now, and has been for the last.
And it's manageable
and
because
it's
you can pay for that.
And there's tax implications, benefits to that,
great.
and things like that. Especially the last couple of years, I've been really considering having an outside space.
Oh, okay.
Being able to go to somewhere, and even if I'm going to that space by myself.
Yeah. As someone who's worked from home and also works at the office, I love the fact that I have an office because
Right.
I can just leave work there and go home.
Right.
Not that I ever leave all of my work there.
Right, no.
But yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
I would like that little bit, what you were saying, a little more separation between work and home
because
life.
there's got to be. Yeah, it mingles too much.
Yeah,
probably
I
for
get I get emails and notifications 20, because Australia, I'm working with a guy in Australia, I'm working with a guy in England, or
Right.
wherever. Like they come in at all hours,
and you respond to them almost on demand.
yeah,
probably.
as soon as I can, as soon as I see them. So
Right.
there's no hours of operation.
Right.
That would be something I'd like to change.
Right. But it's probably not going to change.
Not going to happen anytime soon.
So where can people find your artwork?
I am everywhere. I am markgonyea.com. I am Mark Oblivious at Twitter. I am the other things I would like to change.
Great.
Is I wish I had jumped on board online sooner than I did, because all of my names were taken.
Sure. Oh, absolutely.
So I'm a different person on every.
I think you were Mr. Oblivious for
yeah,
a while.
I was Mr. Oblivious for
which
a
is
while.
one of the characters
Yes.
to your comics.
That was one of
you were doing.
the web comics that I did for a
Yep.
long time, which I loved.
Yeah,
And,
I loved it too. It was great.
I just printed a full, complete compilation
That's
book
great.
of Mr. Oblivious, which will be on my Etsy shop.
But basically, people could look you up by just looking up Mark Gonyea.
If you go to markgonyea.com, that's got my one contact page that has everywhere else on the web people can find.
So
me.
So you do Kickstarters? Do you
Yep.
have a Kickstarter coming up that you could kind of chat
do.
with us about?
I do. I am working on, as a huge movie fan, I'm working on a set of movie challenge coins would be the the closest
So
name
you
for it.
say movie challenge coins. What does that mean?
So, a challenge coin is a coin of application that So if you do a successful event, or you do, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like a reward.
Like
so
a
it
me-
looks
like a medal.
like a medal, yeah,
Okay.
like a little tiny medal.
All right.
So you
Or kind of like an AA coin.
yeah.
You get like, 10 weeks
maybe.
sober, here's
Right.
a coin.
Oh,
All
you
right.
watched Lord of the Rings uncut for straight in one day.
Oh,
here's
goodness.
a
That
fantasy challenge coin.
You should get a reward
right,
for that.
Right.
Wow.
I was like, oh, you've binged the
unabridged
Star Wars
versions
right.
of all
Yeah.
6 Lord of the
Right.
Rings movies.
Right.
That's
So
nuts.
that's my next one. So and I've gotten samples and they look great, and it's one of my first jumps into product other than paper,
Okay.
which is interesting, which is a whole different thing for me.
Yeah, and you were working on dice at some point.
I did.
too?
I did a small little test Kickstarter for that, and that wasn't successful. So
Right.
I
So-
moved on to coins.
But speaking of Kickstarter, so
Yep.
would you say what's the ratio of successful Kickstarters to not successful Kickstarters?
I've been pretty fortunate with Kickstarters, and I like the format, and I like the all or nothing aspect to it.
Right, because you don't have to, unless it's fully funded, you don't have to go
Correct.
through with it.
Yeah.
And the people who fund it don't get charged. Right.
Right. So there's very little risk to it, other
Mm-hmm.
than a little bit of time.
Right.
What was the question?
So as far as Kickstarters fail constantly. So-
I've been fortunate. I've done about 22 Kickstarters, and 17 of them have been successful.
That's great.
Yeah, my aspirations for goals are fairly low on that. Like I'll say, okay, I'm gonna do this set of posters. I need $1,000 for the print run, and I'm gonna print 100 of these 3 posters.
All right.
You know, that's fairly easy to.
Yeah, that's cool.
You know, you only have to pre-sell 20 of each to hit that.
And that's something else you learned probably through a little bit of experience.
Yep, the first Kickstarter failed spectacularly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So if you have any advice for anyone who is deciding that they want to work from home or work for themselves, not necessarily with art,
Yep.
but anything else, what would you give them?
I would say you have to expand beyond your social clique. You have to expand beyond your Facebook friends. You have to be able to reach people that don't know you personally.
Okay.
That was not something that I had a problem with, because I had done so many shows and so many conventions. Like that's where
You made connections.
That's where I expand my fan base.
Right.
Is at shows, and that's really almost even more so than sales at shows. Sales at shows will pay for the travel and getting in the show, but it's the expansion of your customer base that really is the benefit of a show.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mark. Today, so this episode will be up, and we'll share it with you, and you can share it with the people who are beyond your Facebook friends.
Share
if
it
you
with my
want to.
Twitter, my Twitterverse.
So if anybody has any questions for Mark, you can actually shoot them to me, and I'll shoot them to him. You can send me an email, nick@nami-cv.org, or you can comment on the Facebook page or comment on the northvolume.com comment section of this podcast. So thank you, Mark, for being here today.
Thank you really a lot for asking me. It was fun.
It's awesome to catch up with you.
Yeah.
You're one of my favorite artists. So, and take care of each other, because we all know that survival is so much more than just staying alive.